After my husband's death, my sister claimed his baby and demanded half of his $50 million. I laughed. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved one. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. The day of my husband's funeral felt like a blur. I barely noticed the rain soaking my shoes or the way people kept glancing at me with pity. My head felt heavy, my chest tight, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I just kept staring at his closed casket, trying to believe this was really happening. Halfway through the service, I heard the sharp click of heels coming down the aisle. I didn't have to turn my head to know it was my younger sister. She always walked like the world should make way for her. She slid into the seat beside me without a word. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her smooth her hair, lips curved in the faintest smirk. She leaned in so close I could feel her breath on my ear. "I'm pregnant with his child," she whispered. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I turned to look at her, but she only arched an eyebrow like she was daring me to react. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was lying, but the smug way she sat there told me she wasn't. She had chosen this moment here, surrounded by grieving friends and family, to drop her little bomb. The rest of the funeral passed in a haze. People spoke to me, hugged me, told me how sorry they were, but I couldn't hear them. My ears kept ringing with her words. Pregnant, with his child. My husband who had held my hand through every high and low, had been sleeping with my sister. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the kitchen, still in my black dress. My phone lit up with her name. Against my better judgment, I answered. "I'm calling about what we talked about earlier," she said, her tone casual, like we were discussing the weather. I stayed silent. "I'll need half of the estate," she went on. "For the baby." It took me a few seconds to find my voice. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," she said, almost laughing. "This is his child, and it's only fair the baby gets what's owed. Unless you want me to go to court." Her words hung in the air like a foul smell. I could feel something inside me shifting. The sharp, raw grief I had been drowning in began to change. It was no longer heavy. It was hot, burning. I ended the call without another word. My hands were steady now. For the first time since he died, my thoughts were clear. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make her regret every single step she had taken toward me that day. The night after her call, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my study with my laptop open, a small lamp casting shadows on the walls. I started digging. At first, I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that she was lying, something to make all of this less real. But the deeper I went, the less I could deny it. I pulled up our old phone records, scrolling through months of calls and texts. There they were, late-night conversations that went on for hours. Whole weekends where they talked nonstop while I thought he was at conferences. His business trips matched perfectly with times she had suddenly been busy or out of town. From there, I moved on to his email. He hadn't deleted anything important, at least not carefully. Flight confirmations popped up, receipts for hotel stays in cities I'd never been to. Each one was booked for 2 people. I clicked on his credit card statements and saw charges at expensive restaurants in places he told me he had no time to explore. Then I checked social media. I didn't expect much. He never posted often, but she did. At first glance, her photos were harmless. Just landscapes, fancy cocktails, and hotel lobbies. But when I looked closer, I recognized details. The watch on his wrist reflected in the glass of a window, the edge of his jacket sleeve in a cropped selfie, even the same curtains from the hotel confirmation email. She hadn't been hiding him. She'd just been careful to keep him blurry, like a shadow. The worst part came when I opened our shared bank account history. There were large cash withdrawals, always right before these trips. I had thought he was moving money for work expenses, but they lined up too perfectly with her photos and his receipts. He had been using our money to fund every single one of their meetings. I kept going until my eyes burned. I found spa bookings for 2, private boat rentals, and jewelry purchases that had never reached me. One invoice from a boutique hotel had a note attached, "Happy anniversary." My anniversary had been months earlier, so I knew exactly who that was for. It was like watching my life get torn apart in front of me, piece by piece. All the years I thought we were building something together, he was investing in her. Every trip, every dinner, every gift was proof that they had been living a separate life while I sat at home, trusting him. I didn't cry. Not anymore. My chest didn't ache with sadness. It was tighter, sharper. I could feel something hard settling in me. I had spent years giving him everything, and he had handed it all to her. I shut the laptop and sat in silence, my hands flat against the desk. Now I knew the truth, and knowing it was the first step toward taking everything back. The meeting with my husband's lawyer was supposed to be routine. We sat in his office, a quiet space lined with dark shelves and framed degrees. He spoke in a calm, practiced tone, explaining the terms of the will. Every asset, properties, investments, accounts, was in my name. There were no special clauses, no surprises. When I walked out of the building, I already knew what would happen next. My sister didn't waste any time. That evening, she called. Her voice was sharp, impatient, like she'd been waiting all day. "I spoke to my attorney," she said without greeting me. "And I'm telling you right now, if you think you're keeping everything, you're wrong." I didn't respond, so she kept going, her tone rising. "You're trying to rob this child. I'll make sure everyone knows it. The press will eat it up. Widow hoards millions, refuses to support her husband's baby." Her words came fast, like she had rehearsed them. I could almost hear her pacing. "And don't think I won't bring it to court," she added. "I'll make you look like the other woman. You know how easy it is to twist things. People will believe what I tell them. They'll see you as a gold digger who couldn't even let his child have a share." She paused, waiting for me to react. I kept my voice even. "The will is clear. That won't matter when the public turns on you," she snapped. "Once this story's out, you'll be the villain. You'll wish you'd done the right thing when you had the chance." Her threats were sharp, but underneath them I heard something else, certainty. She thought I would cave, that I'd hand over money to avoid the mess. When the call ended, I sat there, staring at the wall. She believed she had leverage. She thought her lies and noise could push me into giving her what she wanted. That was her mistake. I wasn't going to fight her the way she expected. I wouldn't shout back or argue in public. I wouldn't even try to defend myself in the press. Let her think she had the upper hand. Let her believe she could destroy me. Because the truth was, she had no idea what I was capable of. She had never seen me patient. She had never seen me silent by choice. I decided in that moment I wouldn't just protect what was mine. I would take away every piece of power she thought she had. But I'd do it slowly, carefully, in a way she wouldn't notice until it was far too late. The lawyer's papers confirmed the law was on my side. Now, I just had to make sure the rest of the world turned against her. And for that, I was willing to wait as long as it took. I knew my first move had to be convincing. If I wanted her to fall for it, I had to make her believe I was struggling. So the next time she called, I let my voice sound shaky, almost embarrassed. I told her there were things about my husband's finances I hadn't known, debts, unpaid taxes, even quiet hints about illegal deals. "I'm barely holding things together," I said, lowering my voice as if I didn't want anyone else to hear. "There's money missing. Lawyers are saying it could take years to sort out. I don't even know what will be left when this is done." I could feel her curiosity over the phone. She tried to hide it, but she couldn't help asking questions. "How much debt? Who's after you?" She wanted numbers, names, details. I gave her just enough to sound real, but not enough to pin down. Then I dropped the part one knew she'd latch onto. "If you really think you have a case for the baby, you should go to probate court now, before things get worse." There was a pause. She wanted me to tell her not to. She wanted me to act scared of her doing it. Instead, I made it sound like I was too worn down to care. "Maybe it's for the best," I told her. "Maybe you can get something before the creditors take it all." By the end of the call, I could hear the confidence building in her voice. She was picturing herself walking into court, forcing me into a corner. She probably thought I'd show up looking helpless and defeated. What she didn't know was that every word I had given her was bait. The more she believed she was smarter than me, the more reckless she would become. If she thought my husband's estate was unstable, she'd push harder, demand more, dig deeper into processes she didn't understand. I started making small moves to back up the story. I accidentally left overdue bill envelopes on my kitchen counter when she came by unannounced. I mentioned to a mutual friend, knowing it would get back to her, that I might have to sell one of the properties to pay off loans. I even let a fake notice from a collections agency sit where she could see it. She took the bait completely. A week later, I heard from a clerk at the courthouse. She had filed her claim. She had no idea that by doing that, she'd opened herself up to a level of legal scrutiny that would tear through every part of her life. I didn't need to rush. The court system would do most of the work for me. All I had to do was sit back, let her feel like she was finally beating me, and wait for the moment the floor would disappear beneath her feet. I didn't plan to rely only on the court to ruin her claim. I wanted proof, something so solid she couldn't talk her way out of it. That's when I decided to bring in someone who knew how to find the kind of information people worked hard to hide. Through a friend of a friend, I was introduced to a retired FBI investigator. He had the kind of calm presence that made you believe he could see right through you. We met in a small cafe far from town. I told him I needed everything there was to know about my sister, her money, her work, her habits. I didn't give him all the details, only enough for him to understand that she had made herself my enemy. He didn't ask many questions. He just nodded, slid a small notepad into his jacket, and told me he'd be in touch. Weeks passed quietly. I went about my days as if nothing was happening, keeping up my act with her while he worked in the background. Then one morning, he called and asked to meet again. He slid a thick folder across the table. "You might want to sit down before you go through this," he said. The first section was about money. She had been taking funds from the inheritance our parents had left us. Amounts small enough at first to go unnoticed, but over the years it had added up to tens of thousands. She'd also been funneling money from her job, disguising it as expenses. There were emails, altered receipts, and even a hidden account in another state. The second section covered her personal life. It was worse than I expected. She had been lying to almost everyone she knew, building a version of herself that looked successful and polished while hiding the mess behind. Vacations she claimed were paid for by friends were actually charged to credit cards she wasn't paying off. Clothes she flaunted online still had store security tags removed only days before she wore them. And then there was the pregnancy. The investigator had tracked down medical records she thought were private. The dates didn't match her story. In fact, they proved something impossible. The conception had happened before she and my husband had even been in contact again. There was no way he could be the father. That single fact was more powerful than anything else in the folder. The rest would ruin her reputation, but this would destroy her entire claim before it ever reached trial. I closed the folder and sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. Every page was another nail in the coffin she had built for herself. She had been so sure of her control, but she didn't even know the ground under her was already gone. I thanked him, paid in cash, and walked out with the folder under my arm. It was time to decide exactly how I wanted to use it. I knew showing her the evidence directly would only give her time to prepare excuses. She'd spin a new story, cry for sympathy, and try to turn it back on me. I wanted the opposite. I wanted her cornered with no way to escape. So I chose to let the world see who she really was. There's a gossip site that thrives on messy stories. They don't care about being polite or discreet. Their readers eat up scandals like candy, especially when it involves money, lies, and family drama. I reached out through an encrypted email, pretending to be a concerned friend. I sent them everything the investigator had given me, but carefully. I didn't hand over the medical records yet. I wanted that piece saved for the final blow. Instead, I sent photos of her with other men, some taken during the same months she claimed to be devoted to my husband. There were screenshots of her messages to me, demanding money for the baby and threatening to destroy my reputation if I didn't agree. The part that I knew would sting the most was the fake pregnancy. She had been posting pictures of herself with a growing belly, trying to look glowing and maternal. But the investigator had traced several of those pictures back to Pinterest and stock photo sites. I sent the originals alongside her edited version. It was impossible to deny. Same clothing, same background, even the same shadows. I packaged it all in a clean, detailed timeline for the site. They didn't even ask for payment. Stories like this were their goldmine. It didn't take long. The post went live in the middle of the afternoon, and within hours it was spreading everywhere. Twitter threads, Facebook shares, private group chats. People weren't just reading it. They were tearing her apart in the comments. By the time she called me that night, her voice was almost unrecognizable. She sounded panicked, out of breath. "You need to help me fix this," she demanded. "Someone's spreading lies about me." I pretended to be surprised. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "That garbage online, it's ruining me. People from work have seen it. My friends are asking questions." I told her I hadn't seen anything and hung up before she could accuse me. I didn't need to hear her rage. The damage was already done. By morning, bigger outlets had picked up the story. They blurred her face, but kept enough details that anyone who knew her would recognize the truth. She was getting calls she didn't want, messages she couldn't answer, and the kind of attention no one could control. She had always believed she could control the narrative. Now she didn't even own her own name. And the best part? I hadn't even used my strongest card yet. The court date came faster than I expected. She had pushed her claim forward, confident she could still win despite the public backlash. I walked into the courtroom prepared, my lawyer carrying a folder that would end this before it even began. When she arrived, she made sure everyone saw her. She wore a fitted designer dress with a noticeable round belly under it, her hand resting on it as if for emphasis. Her makeup was perfect, hair curled just right, and she even gave a soft smile to the reporters in the hallway. She was there to play the part of the wronged, expectant mother. She took her seat with her attorney, whispering and occasionally glancing my way. I didn't return the look. I kept my focus forward, calm and still. My lawyer had told me the key to winning was letting the evidence speak for itself. The judge began by reviewing the basics of the case, then allowed both sides to present. Her lawyer went first, talking about fairness and providing for the child. He painted her as a woman left to fend for herself after being betrayed by her own family. She nodded at the right moments, touching the fake bump as though it might sway the room. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, walked to the center, and began in a steady voice. Your Honor, before we address any claims about the estate, we must first address the matter of paternity. He handed a sealed envelope to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. This, my lawyer continued, is the result of a legally obtained prenatal DNA test. It was collected through the standard court-approved method. The results are conclusive. The judge opened the file, his eyes scanning the page. Then he looked up. The father of this child is not the late Mr. Hayes. The words hit the room like a dropped glass. There was a ripple of gasps from the few spectators, and even the bailiff raised an eyebrow. My sister's attorney froze mid-note, his pen hovering in the air. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her face flushed, and she clutched at the fake bump as though it could protect her. My lawyer, calm as ever, returned to the table and sat down without another word. Her attorney scrambled to request a recess, clearly trying to buy time, but the judge granted it with a sharp warning about wasting the court's resources. Before anyone could process what had happened, she was on her feet, moving toward the side exit. Reporters and photographers were waiting outside. I didn't follow, but I heard the commotion, shouts, camera clicks, her voice raised in protest. They had chased scandals before, but now they had the proof they needed to run her out of whatever sympathy she thought she had left. I sat there, still and composed. The hardest part was over. Now, it was just a matter of watching her world collapse completely. After the courtroom disaster, things started falling apart for her faster than I imagined. It began with her job. The company issued a short statement saying she was being let go for conduct unbecoming of an employee. They didn't give details, but they didn't have to. Everyone had seen the stories. Clients pulled away, and co-workers who once smiled at her in the office now avoided her name entirely. Her social life crumbled next. The friends who had been quick to share drinks and gossip with her suddenly had no time. Calls went unanswered, texts left on read. Even the ones who might have believed her before didn't want to be associated with the mess she'd created. Being seen with her was bad for their own reputations, and she was learning quickly how fast loyalty could disappear. That was when I decided to give the final push. Using information from the investigator's report, I contacted the people she owed money to. Credit card companies, private lenders, even a jeweler who had been chasing her for months over unpaid items. I didn't have to say much, just enough to point them toward her current address and the fact she was no longer employed. The calls from creditors started within days. Then came the letters, the warnings, the threats of legal action. With no steady income and no one willing to lend her more, she had to start selling what she owned. The flashy car she'd loved to post pictures of online was the first to go. Next were the expensive handbags and designer shoes. She tried to sell them quietly, but nothing stayed quiet in her life anymore. Eventually, the jewelry disappeared too. Some pieces I recognized from family events, gifts she'd once bragged about. All of it gone in exchange for a fraction of what she had paid. But none of it was enough to cover everything she owed. When the notices came about her condo, she tried to fight them, but there was no point. She couldn't make the payments, and the lenders weren't interested in her excuses. The place went into foreclosure, and an auction date was set. The last time I saw her during that period, she didn't look like the same person. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes plain and wrinkled. She moved differently too, no confident stride, no air of superiority. Just someone weighed down by problems she couldn't fix. This was the same woman who had walked into my husband's funeral with her chin high and a smirk on her face. Back then, she'd been certain she could take everything from me. Now, she was struggling to keep a roof over her head. She had built her life on lies and money that wasn't hers, and now she couldn't even afford a decent meal. The fall hadn't just been public, it had been complete, and I was far from finished. The condo went up for auction on a gray, rainy morning. I didn't go in person. Instead, I sent someone I trusted to bid on my behalf through a shell company I had set up weeks earlier. It was a quiet process. No one there knew who was behind the purchase. By the end of the day, the place was mine for a fraction of its value. A week later, I arranged for the keys to be delivered to me. I didn't plan to live there. I had no interest in keeping anything that had belonged to her. But I wanted the satisfaction of knowing that even the walls around her weren't hers anymore. She had been given a short deadline to clear out her belongings. On the final day, I made sure to be inside when she arrived. I sat in the living room, a glass of wine in my hand, the windows open just enough for the damp air to drift in. When she walked through the door, she stopped dead. Her eyes moved over me, then the glass in my hand, then the room itself. She knew instantly. "This is yours," she asked, her voice tight. I took a slow sip before answering. "It is now." Her face hardened, but I kept my tone calm. "I wanted to tell you in person that you can keep one thing from all of this." She waited, tense. "Your dignity," I said. "If you can still find it." Her breath caught, and for a moment, I thought she might say nothing. But then her jaw clenched, and she let out a bitter laugh. You'll regret this. I leaned back against the chair. I already don't. She moved quickly after that, grabbing boxes and shoving clothes into bags. The room was quiet except for the sound of zippers and drawers closing. She didn't look at me again, but I didn't take my eyes off her. I wanted her to feel it, that she wasn't just losing things, she was losing to me. When she finished, she left without another word. I watched her walk down the hall, her steps heavy, shoulders slumped. She didn't glance back. Once the door shut behind her, I set the wine glass down and looked around the emptying space. There was nothing special about the condo itself, just another piece of property. But taking it from her had been more than a transaction. It was the last thread she'd been holding on to, the final place where she could pretend she still had control. Now it was gone, and with it, any illusion she'd had of winning. I locked the door, the keys cold in my hand, and walked out without looking back. My plan was complete. With her gone and no more claims hanging over me, the estate was finally quiet. Every part of my husband's empire was now under my control, his businesses, his properties, his investments. It felt strange at first, having all of it to myself. Not because I doubted I could handle it, but because for so long, I'd been forced to fight just to keep what was already mine. Now there was nothing left to fight for. I didn't waste time doing what I wanted with it. The first move was purely for me. I went through his list of favorite charities and political donations, the ones he had proudly supported while he was alive, and I gave large sums to the exact opposite causes. It wasn't about doing good or bad. It was about knowing he would have hated every single check I signed. That small act gave me a private, sharp sense of satisfaction. From there, I began shaping the estate into something that reflected me, not him. I sold properties that held no meaning for me and used the money to expand the gardens around the main house. Roses, magnolias, fountains, winding paths. Things I'd always wanted but that he once dismissed as unnecessary. Now they were mine to create. Every morning, I walked those gardens before breakfast. The air was fresh, the silence deep. I'd stop by the fountain in the center and look out at the estate stretching around me, the same land my sister had imagined herself living on one day. I could almost picture her face if she saw it now, knowing it was more beautiful than before and completely out of her reach. I didn't fool myself into thinking I was healed. Betrayal doesn't vanish just because you win. The sting was still there, somewhere beneath the surface, but it no longer controlled me. I could carry it without feeling crushed by it. Sometimes people asked if I'd ever speak to her again, or if I'd forgive her. I never gave a direct answer. In truth, I didn't think about her much anymore, not in anger and not in longing. She was simply gone from my life, like a stain I'd scrubbed out until there was no trace. What mattered was that the balance had shifted. She had walked into my life thinking she could strip me of everything. In the end, I had taken everything from her instead. And I hadn't just taken it, I had built something stronger from it. Control. That was what I felt every time I stepped outside and saw the sun hit the flowers, every time I walked through the halls of a home that was entirely mine. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but it was enough. And enough was all I needed.